Emily Carter was replacing targets at the 600-yard line when the argument erupted behind her. A group of Navy SEALs had been training all morning, and their newest member, Miller, was failing miserably at long-range shots that should have been routine. "I'm telling you, something's wrong with this rifle," Miller insisted, frustration evident in his voice. His team leader, Chief Petty Officer Ben Thompson, was losing patience. Emily had watched Miller's form for the past hour. His breathing was erratic, his grip inconsistent, and he was jerking the trigger like he was trying to ring a doorbell. When Miller threw down the rifle in anger, declaring the weapon was completely screwed up, Emily found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "The rifle's fine. You're pulling your shots left because you're anticipating recoil." The entire SEAL team turned to stare at the 21-year-old college student who just critiqued a Navy special operator. The morning had started like any other for Emily. She'd arrived at the Oceanside shooting range at 5:30 a.m., 45 minutes before opening, to prepare for what her supervisor warned would be a busy day. The Navy had booked the entire long-range section for special operations training, which meant Emily would spend most of her time running targets back and forth while trying to stay invisible. She'd learned early in her 10 months on the job that military customers preferred their range staff to be seen and not heard. Emily had taken the job out of necessity rather than passion. Nursing school was expensive, and her father's disability pension from his Marine Corps service only stretched so far. The range work paid better than most part-time jobs available to students, and the flexible hours allowed her to attend classes. What she hadn't expected was how much she'd learn just by observing. Every day brought different shooters with varying skill levels, and Emily found herself unconsciously cataloging their techniques, noting what worked and what didn't. Her father, Gunnery Sergeant Frank Carter, had taught her to shoot when she was 13, but it was more about safety and basic marksmanship than advanced techniques. "Shooting is like surgery," he told her during one of their weekend range sessions. "It requires patience, precision, and the ability to control your body under pressure." Those words had stuck with her, especially as she watched countless shooters struggle with fundamentals they should have mastered years ago. The SEALs had arrived just after 6:15 a.m. in 2 black SUVs. Their gear bags and rifle cases suggested they planned to stay all day. Emily recognized the type immediately. Quiet professionals who moved with purpose and spoke in the economical language of people accustomed to high-stakes situations. Ben Thompson stood out as their leader, not because he was the loudest or most imposing, but because the others naturally deferred to his judgment. Miller was different, younger than the rest. He carried himself with the swagger of someone trying to prove he belonged. Emily had seen the type before, usually civilian shooters who'd watched too many action movies and thought marksmanship was about looking cool rather than mastering fundamentals. But Miller wasn't a civilian. He was a Navy SEAL, which made his poor performance all the more puzzling. From her position at the target line, Emily had a perfect view of the firing positions. She watched Miller settle behind his rifle, noting immediately that his body position was all wrong. His left elbow was too far under the rifle, creating an unstable platform. His cheek weld was inconsistent, meaning his eye alignment with the scope changed with each shot. Most critically, she could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his trigger finger moved in a jerky, slapping motion rather than the smooth, straight-back squeeze her father had drilled into her. The first few shots confirmed her assessment. Even with a high-quality rifle and match-grade ammunition, Miller's shots were scattered across the target like a shotgun pattern. Each miss seemed to increase his frustration, which only made his technique worse. Emily found herself mentally coaching him, wishing she could offer the simple corrections that would transform his shooting. "Breathe through your shots," she whispered to herself, watching Miller hold his breath for impossibly long periods. "Relax your grip. Follow through." But Miller couldn't hear her silent advice, and his teammates seemed more interested in ribbing him about his poor performance than offering constructive help. Ben Thompson was different. Emily noticed him studying Miller's form with the analytical eye of someone who understood the mechanics of marksmanship. She could see him making mental notes, probably planning to address the issues during their debrief. But Miller's ego was getting in the way of learning, and his insistence that the equipment was faulty was preventing any real progress. When Miller finally exploded in frustration, throwing down the rifle and cursing the weapon, Emily felt her father's training kick in. Frank Carter had never tolerated excuses or blame shifting. A craftsman never blames his tools, he'd say whenever Emily complained about her rifle's performance. Master yourself first, then worry about equipment. The words left her mouth before her brain could engage the filter that usually kept her quiet around military customers. In that moment, she wasn't a part-time range employee trying to stay invisible. She was Frank Carter's daughter, someone who'd been raised to speak truth even when it was uncomfortable. The silence that followed her observation felt like it lasted forever, but Emily knew there was no taking back what she'd said. She'd just challenged a Navy SEAL's competence in front of his teammates, and now she'd have to face the consequences. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Ben stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied Emily. "You think you can do better?" he asked, his tone carrying both skepticism and curiosity. Miller scoffed, but Ben held up a hand to silence him. Emily's heart pounded as she realized what she'd gotten herself into. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Never make a claim you can't back up." She nodded, and Ben picked up the rifle Miller had abandoned. "Tell you what," Ben said, checking the chamber and handing her the weapon. "Miller has been trying to hit that target all morning. You make the shot and I'll buy lunch for everyone here. You miss, and you explain to my commanding officer why a civilian was handling military weapons." The other SEALs gathered around, some smirking, others genuinely curious. Emily accepted the rifle, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The weight of the rifle surprised her. It was heavier than her father's hunting rifle, with a different balance point and a scope that felt foreign under her cheek. Emily ran her hands along the weapon, familiarizing herself with its contours while trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. The other SEALs had formed a loose semicircle behind the firing line, their conversation dying as they realized Ben was serious about letting a range employee handle their equipment. "This is insane," Miller muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's a college kid who changes targets for a living. What's she going to teach us about shooting?" Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks, but Ben's steady gaze kept her focused. There was something in his expression that suggested this wasn't just about proving a point to Miller. He was genuinely curious about what she might be capable of. And that realization both terrified and motivated her. "What's your background?" Ben asked, his voice neutral but probing. "Military family." "My father's a retired Marine gunnery sergeant," Emily replied, checking the rifle's safety and action with practiced movements. "He taught me to shoot when I was 13. We've been going to the range together every weekend for the past 8 years. One of the other SEALs, a lean man with graying temples, whistled softly. "Gunny Carter? Frank Carter?" Emily's head snapped up in surprise. "You know my father?" "Know of him," the SEAL, who introduced himself as Chief Petty Officer David Reed, replied with newfound respect. "He was an instructor at the Scout Sniper School before his injury. Legendary reputation for turning average Marines into precision shooters. If you're his daughter, maybe this isn't as crazy as it sounds." The revelation changed the atmosphere immediately. Miller's smirk faded, and even the skeptical SEALs began paying closer attention. Emily felt a surge of pride mixed with pressure. Her father's reputation was now on the line along with her own. Ben gestured toward the 600-yard target that had been frustrating Miller all morning. Same target, same conditions. Winds running about 6 to 8 miles per hour from the left. You've got match-grade 175 grain ammunition, and the rifle zeroed at 200 yards. He paused, studying her face. "You sure about this?" Emily nodded, though her mouth had gone dry. She'd made similar shots countless times with her father, but never under this kind of scrutiny. The range suddenly felt like a stage with 8 elite warriors as her audience and her credibility as the performance. "Before I shoot," Emily said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded, Can I show you what Miller was doing wrong? It might help him understand why he was missing. Miller started to protest, but Ben cut him off with a sharp look. Go ahead. Emily moved to the shooting position Miller had vacated, settling behind the rifle but not yet taking aim. First issue is body position, she began, demonstrating Miller's stance. He was putting too much weight on his left elbow, creating an unstable platform. Watch what happens when I shift my weight. She adjusted her position, showing how proper bone support created a more stable shooting platform. Second problem was grip pressure, she continued, wrapping her hands around the rifle. He was death gripping the weapon, which transfers muscle tension through the stock and throws off natural point of aim. The grip should be firm but relaxed, like holding a bird, tight enough that it can't fly away, gentle enough that you don't hurt it. The SEALs exchanged glances, clearly impressed by her technical knowledge and teaching ability. Even Miller was paying attention now, his defensive posture softening as he recognized the validity of her observations. The biggest issue was trigger control, Emily said, placing her finger on the trigger. He was slapping it like he was trying to surprise himself. Proper trigger control is about steady, straight-back pressure with follow-through. You should be surprised when the rifle fires, but not because you jerked the trigger. Ben nodded approvingly. Textbook explanation. Now, let's see if you can execute what you're teaching. Emily settled into her final shooting position, making minute adjustments until everything felt right. The rifle scope was clearer than what she was used to, and the target seemed to leap into sharp focus. She could feel the wind on her left cheek, noting its consistency and estimating the correction needed. One more thing, she said, glancing back at Miller. You are holding your breath too long. That creates muscle tension and makes your heart rate spike. Natural respiratory pause. Breathe normally. Exhale halfway. Then hold for the shot. Your body will be relaxed and your heart rate steady. She demonstrated the breathing technique, feeling her pulse slow as she found her natural pause. The crosshairs settled on the target, and Emily began her trigger press, applying steady pressure while maintaining perfect sight alignment. The moment felt suspended in time. 8 pairs of eyes watched her every movement, and Emily could almost feel the weight of their expectations. Her father's training took over. Years of weekend practice sessions, condensing into this single moment. The trigger broke cleanly, surprising her just as it should, and the rifle recoiled straight back into her shoulder. Through the scope, Emily watched the bullet impact, a small puff of dust appearing exactly where she'd aimed. But she wasn't done yet. Without lifting her head from the scope, she worked the bolt smoothly, chambered another round, and settled back into position. The second shot followed the first, then a third, each one placed with deliberate precision. When she finally lifted her head from the scope, the range was completely silent except for the distant sound of waves against the cliffs. Ben was studying the target through his spotting scope, his expression unreadable. Finally, he lowered the scope and looked at Emily with something approaching awe. 3 shots, 1.5-inch group, dead center, he announced to the team. That's better shooting than most of us managed this morning. Holy shit, Miller whispered. The aftermath of her shooting demonstration created an electric tension on the range. Emily carefully safed the rifle and handed it back to Ben, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She'd just outperformed a Navy SEAL in front of his entire team, and the implications of that achievement were beginning to sink in. Miller stared at the target in disbelief, then back at Emily. That's impossible, he muttered. Nobody shoots that well on their first try with an unfamiliar rifle. It's not her first try, Ben said quietly, still studying Emily with calculating eyes. This is someone who's been shooting seriously for years. The question is, why are you working at a range instead of competing professionally? Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm in nursing school. This is just a part-time job to pay for tuition. I never thought about competing or anything like that. David Reed stepped forward. Your father never mentioned you could shoot like this. He knows I'm decent, Emily replied, downplaying her abilities out of habit. But we just shoot for fun on weekends. Nothing serious. Reed exchanged a meaningful look with Ben. "Ma'am, what you just did isn't decent. That's expert-level marksmanship under pressure. Most people would have choked with this many people watching." The praise made Emily uncomfortable. She'd grown up in a household where competence was expected, not celebrated. Her father had always emphasized that shooting well was simply a matter of applying proper fundamentals consistently. The idea that her performance was exceptional felt foreign. "Can you do it again?" Miller asked, his earlier hostility replaced by genuine curiosity. "I mean, maybe that was just luck." Ben held up a hand before Emily could respond. "Miller, stand down. She's already proven her point." He turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. "But I am curious about something. You diagnosed Miller's problems just by watching him shoot. That suggests you understand not just how to shoot, but how to teach it. Where did that come from?" Emily considered the question carefully. "I've been watching people shoot here for 10 months. You start to see patterns, the same mistakes over and over. My father always said that teaching someone to shoot well is harder than shooting well yourself, because you have to understand why things go wrong, not just how to do them right." "Smart man, your father," Reed observed, and he obviously raised a smart daughter. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another vehicle, a black sedan that pulled up to the range office. A man in navy dress blues emerged, his bearing and the deference shown by the SEALs indicating significant rank. "That's Commander Evans," Ben said quietly to Emily. "He's probably here to check on our training progress." Emily felt a spike of anxiety. She was still holding a military rifle, having just demonstrated shooting skills that had impressed a team of special operators. The situation suddenly felt much more complicated than a simple range demonstration. Commander Evans approached the group, his eyes taking in the scene with practiced assessment. "Chief Thompson, how's the training progressing?" "Very well, sir," Ben replied. "We've actually had some unexpected assistance from one of the range staff. This is Emily Carter. Her father is Gunnery Sergeant Frank Carter, formerly of the Scout Sniper School." The commander's eyebrows rose slightly. "Carter, I know that name. Excellent instructor before his injury." He studied Emily with new interest. "And what kind of assistance have you been providing, Miss Carter?" Emily felt the weight of command attention and struggled to find her voice. Ben stepped in smoothly. She identified some fundamental issues with Miller's shooting technique and provided expert-level coaching. Then she demonstrated proper form with a 3-shot group that would qualify for our advanced marksmanship standards. Commander Evans's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine attention. "Is that so? And what's your background, Miss Carter?" "I'm a nursing student, sir," Emily replied, finding her voice. "I work here part-time and shoot recreationally with my father." "Recreationally," the commander repeated, a hint of amusement in his voice. He walked over to the spotting scope and examined Emily's target. After a long moment, he returned to the group. "Miss Carter, that's not recreational shooting. That's precision marksmanship at a level that would qualify you for military competition teams." The praise felt surreal. Emily had always thought of herself as a decent shooter who'd learned from her father, nothing more. The idea that her skills might have broader applications had never seriously occurred to her. "Sir," Ben interjected, "with your permission, I'd like to invite Miss Carter to observe some of our advanced training sessions. Her ability to diagnose and correct shooting problems could be valuable for our newer team members." Emily's heart raced. The opportunity to learn from elite military operators was beyond anything she'd imagined when she'd spoken up about Miller's technique. But it also felt overwhelming. She was just a college student trying to pay for school, not someone qualified to train Navy SEALs. Commander Evans considered the request carefully. "Miss Carter, would you be interested in such an arrangement?" "It would be unofficial, of course, but we're always looking for ways to improve our training effectiveness." Emily looked around at the faces watching her, Ben's encouraging expression, Reed's respectful attention, even Miller's newfound interest. These were some of the most elite warriors in the world, and they were asking for her help. The scared part of her wanted to decline, to return to the safety of her routine job, changing targets and sweeping brass. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. When opportunity knocks, you better be ready to answer the door. Yes, sir, she heard herself saying. I'd be honored to help however I can. Commander Evans nodded approvingly. Excellent. Chief Thompson will coordinate with your supervisor about scheduling. And Miss Carter. He paused, fixing her with a steady gaze. Don't underestimate what you've accomplished here today. Talent like yours doesn't come along often. As the commander walked away, Emily realized her life had just taken an unexpected turn. What had started as a simple correction to a frustrated SEAL's technique had evolved into something much larger. She was no longer just Emily Carter, the nursing student who worked at a shooting range. She was someone whose skills had been recognized by the Navy's elite. And that recognition was about to open doors she'd never imagined existed. Emily's reputation grew beyond the local range when Ben recommended her for a civilian marksmanship instructor position with a military contractor. The job offered better pay, flexible hours around her nursing studies, and the opportunity to work with various military units. Her father was proud but not surprised. He'd always known she had the focus and patience for precision shooting. A year later, Emily found herself training not just Navy SEALs, but Marines, Army Rangers, and law enforcement officers. She completed her nursing degree while building a second career she never expected. The shy range assistant had discovered that sometimes the most significant opportunities come from simply being observant, helpful, and ready when someone hands you a chance to prove yourself. The transformation didn't happen overnight. In the weeks following her demonstration with the SEALs, Emily found herself caught between two worlds. Her familiar routine as a nursing student and part-time range employee, and the exciting but intimidating prospect of working with elite military units. Ben had been true to his word, arranging for her to observe several advanced training sessions where she quietly watched and learned, occasionally offering insights when asked. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging session with a group of Marine Scout snipers who were struggling with long-range wind reading. Emily had been observing from the sidelines when she noticed something the instructors had missed. A subtle wind pattern created by the range's topography that was affecting bullet trajectory in ways the standard wind flags weren't indicating. When she hesitantly mentioned her observation to Ben, he immediately called for a training halt and asked her to explain what she was seeing. Standing before a group of hardened Marines, Emily felt her old nervousness return. But as she began explaining the wind patterns, pointing out the visual indicators she'd learned to read from years of shooting with her father in various conditions, her confidence grew. The Marines listened intently, and when they applied her corrections, their accuracy improved dramatically. Word of the range girl who could read wind like a weather map spread quickly through the military training community. Commander Evans had been present during that session. Afterward, he pulled Emily aside for a private conversation. Miss Carter, I've been watching your progress over the past month. You have a rare combination of technical knowledge, teaching ability, and situational awareness that's frankly wasted on target replacement duty. Have you ever considered making this a career? Emily's first instinct was to deflect. I'm committed to finishing nursing school, sir. This is just something I do on the side. I'm not asking you to abandon your education, Evans replied. But there are opportunities in the civilian contractor world that might interest you. Companies that provide specialized training to military and law enforcement units. The pay is excellent, the work is meaningful, and the schedule could accommodate your academic commitments. That conversation led to a meeting with Dr. Lena Chen, a former Army officer who now ran Precision Training Solutions, a contractor specializing in advanced marksmanship instruction. Lena had heard about Emily through military channels and was intrigued by reports of her unconventional background and natural teaching ability. Most of our instructors come from military sniper backgrounds, Lena explained during their interview. They're technically excellent, but sometimes struggle to communicate with students who don't share their experience base. You have a different perspective. You learned as a civilian. You understand the fundamentals from the ground up, and you've demonstrated an ability to diagnose and correct problems that even experienced shooters miss. The job offer was compelling. Triple her current range salary, flexible scheduling around her class commitments, opportunities to travel and work with different units, and comprehensive training in advanced marksmanship techniques. But what sealed Emily's decision was Lena's final comment. "We're not just looking for another instructor. We're looking for someone who can help us develop new training methodologies. Someone who thinks differently about how to teach precision shooting." Emily's father had been characteristically direct when she called to discuss the opportunity. "Mia, you've been given a gift. Not just the ability to shoot well, but the ability to help others shoot well. That's rare. If you don't use it, you're wasting something precious." Her first official assignment came 3 months later. A week-long course for a mixed group of military and law enforcement snipers at a training facility in North Carolina. Emily arrived, nervous but determined, carrying lesson plans she developed with Lena's guidance and equipment she was still learning to use. The students ranged from experienced military snipers looking to refine their skills to police officers taking their first advanced marksmanship course. The week started roughly. Several of the military students were skeptical about learning from someone who'd never served, and Emily could feel their resistance during her initial presentations. But as the training progressed and her methods proved effective, attitudes began to shift. Her approach was different from traditional military instruction, more analytical, more focused on understanding the why behind each technique rather than simply drilling repetition. The turning point came on the 3rd day when a veteran Marine sniper who'd been openly dismissive of Emily's methods found himself struggling with a particularly challenging shot sequence. After watching him fail repeatedly, Emily approached and quietly suggested a modification to his shooting position based on his body mechanics. The adjustment worked immediately, and his accuracy improved dramatically. "How did you see that?" he asked afterward. Genuine curiosity replacing his earlier skepticism. "I've been watching people shoot for a 1.5 years now," Emily replied. "Everyone's body is different, and sometimes the textbook position isn't optimal for a particular shooter. You have longer arms than average, so the standard position was creating tension in your shoulders. The modification accommodated your natural build." That evening, the same Marine approached her privately. "I owe you an apology. I thought you were just some civilian who got lucky with a few good shots. But you understand this stuff at a level most instructors never reach. Where did you really learn all this?" Emily smiled, thinking of her father and the countless weekend range sessions that had seemed so ordinary at the time. From watching, listening, and trying to understand why things work the way they do. "My father always said that shooting is just applied physics and psychology. If you understand both, you can help anyone improve." By the end of the week, Emily had not only won over her skeptical students, but had also identified several areas where traditional training methods could be improved. Her after-action report to Lena was filled with observations and recommendations that would eventually influence how precision training solutions approached instruction. A year into her new career, Emily found herself in situations she could never have imagined. She trained FBI hostage rescue teams in urban precision shooting, worked with Army Rangers on advanced ballistics calculations, and even consulted with Olympic shooting coaches on mental preparation techniques. Each assignment taught her something new and reinforced her growing confidence in her abilities. The financial impact was transformative. Emily was able to pay off her student loans early, help her father with some overdue medical bills, and even start saving for the future. But more importantly, she'd found work that felt meaningful. Every student who improved under her guidance, every technique she helped refine, every problem she solved contributed to the effectiveness of people whose jobs involved protecting others. Her nursing degree remained important to her, and she completed it on schedule despite her demanding travel schedule. But as graduation approached, Emily realized she was no longer planning to work in a hospital. She'd found her calling in an unexpected place, teaching skills that could mean the difference between life and death for the people she trained. The shy range assistant who'd once been afraid to speak up had become Emily Carter, precision marksmanship instructor and consultant. She'd discovered that expertise could come from unexpected places. That teaching was as much about understanding people as understanding techniques, and that sometimes the most important career decisions were made not in boardrooms or guidance counselor offices, but on shooting ranges where someone handed you a rifle and stepped aside to see what you could do. Looking back, Emily often marveled at how a single moment of speaking up had changed everything. If she'd kept quiet that morning, if she'd let Miller continue blaming his equipment, if she'd been too intimidated to accept Ben's challenge, she'd still be changing targets and sweeping brass. Instead, she'd built a career that combined her natural abilities with her desire to help others, proving that sometimes the most significant opportunities come disguised as simple moments when someone asks, "Do you think you can do better?"